Hello, beautiful souls. I'm really a bit nervous to do this one today, which is good. I'm leaning in. Today I want to talk about vulnerability and our relationship to vulnerability and what it means. And that's why I've got one of my favorite books here, The Gifts of Imperfection. I absolutely love this book by Brené Brown, and if you are someone who is leaning into vulnerability, if you're learning how to be authentic, if you're breaking up with perfectionism, this was one of the first books that really helped me to break up with perfectionism, and I really recommend it to all my clients. It's such a good read, and it's got a lot of science as well, which for a lot of people that's what they need to really help them. You know, we need to get the mind on board as well as the heart, the body, the spirit. We need it all on board. So an amazing book. And there's a piece in here that I want to refer to, so that's why I've got it here. So I want to get vulnerable with you, and it's something I know a lot of people struggle with, and I have definitely struggled with it too. Maybe not as much as most people, because I'm very open and I love connection. Human connection is what I'm here for, and my relationship with vulnerability is the more vulnerable I am, the more love and connection I receive. So that has helped me build a really positive relationship with vulnerability. But the old me did struggle with perfectionism, because perfectionism gets in the way of vulnerability and connection, because we're always striving to appear like we've got it all together and we know what to do and that we don't need any help and all of these things, which are not vulnerable. And perfectionism can make you think that vulnerability is weakness. But I was actually talking to my husband about this the other day, that vulnerability is courage, and it's a courage that can look lots of different ways. Vulnerability doesn't have to mean crying and tears, and it definitely can. But it can actually be, and for me, the truth of vulnerability is sharing what's on your heart. Speaking your truth in moments when you're wanting to filter or not speak the truth, when you're wanting to say what you think somebody wants to hear rather than what you know you need to say. So being vulnerable is being in integrity with your soul. It's being connected to your feelings and expressing how you feel. It's speaking your truth. It's opening up to uncomfortable situations and conversations and bringing your full self and your whole heart to the conversation, regardless of how it's going to be received. So you're not actually doing it to achieve an outcome with the other person. You're actually doing it to free yourself. And I'm going to share a little practice where I'm going to invite you to get really vulnerable. And the reason I'm doing this is vulnerability really is the step towards freedom and authenticity. The more vulnerable we can be, the freer we are in ourselves, the more we honor our own truth and our own dreams and our wishes and our desires and what we want and what we don't want. The easier it is to set boundaries in relationships, or to know what we are available for and what we're not available for. So strangely, the more vulnerable I am, the more in control I feel of my life. And there's this funny saying that, it's quite a bit of a mind trip, because basically the more the less control you have, so the more out of control you get, the more you let your feelings out, the more control you will actually have of your feelings. So I know that's a bit confusing, so I'll repeat it. So the less control you have, the more control you will actually have of your feelings and your emotions and how you're feeling. So, and that's where vulnerability comes in, because vulnerability is choosing to not hide. It's choosing not to numb. It's choosing not to close. Vulnerability is saying, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to let it out. I'm not going to control it. I'm not going to suppress it. I'm not going to tame it. I'm not going to filter it. I'm going to let it out. This is how I'm feeling. So I really just want to invite you to first just ask that question. What is your relationship to vulnerability? Because your relationship is what's determining whether you are leaning into vulnerability or not. If you're seeing vulnerability as a weakness or as a fear, as danger, as anything that is negative, it's very unlikely that you're going to lean into it. Whereas if your relationship is more positive and you see that, through vulnerability, I get what I actually want, which is love and connection. I feel seen, heard, and validated in what I'm feeling when I'm vulnerable. And that's what I want. That's what everyone's looking for and craving, that validation of ourselves, of our authentic selves. And that's the key. In order for your authentic self to be validated, you must be vulnerable, because that's how you show your authentic self. That's how you show your soul's essence, your spirit, who you are. If you're hiding that away and not showing all of it, or just letting a little bit out, that's not your authentic self. So it often feels rejected by the other, because the energy of an authentic soul is so different to somebody who's striving for perfectionism and is trapped, has put themselves in a box, and they've become they've become very defined. Their identity is this box that they've put themselves in, and it's who they think they need to be to receive love, validation, praise, whatever it is, to appear perfect. And it actually just keeps them trapped and separated from their authentic self. So it's like, how out of control can you allow yourself to be? How much can you let go of all of the control in your life where you're controlling, and actually allow how you're feeling out, and actually honoring your authentic self? And I'm not going to lie, I know it is scary. It definitely is. But the more I do it, the freer I feel, the more connected and in tune with my authentic soul I feel, and the more love and connection I feel with the people in my life and in my relationships. And the closer I get to the truth. Vulnerability really is the pathway to the truth. And that's the next question I want to ask. It's, what's getting in the way of your vulnerability? What are you trying to hide? What are you numbing? What are you avoiding looking at? And it's really important that we can name it and claim it. And the reason why we need to name it and claim it is because part of vulnerability is actually taking responsibility for how we feel and letting go of blame. So not blaming the other person for how we're feeling, and actually taking ownership of our feelings as our own. And when we do that, the most amazing thing happens is we can actually process it, because we've gone into the pain, we've lent into it, we've owned that this is how I feel, we've been vulnerable about how we feel. We can process it, we can do what we need to do to move through the feeling, and then on the other side, there's this freedom. Our hearts expand, we open up even more, and we can be more true to who we are and what we want. And that's the key. So what are you trying to hide? I know for me, the old me, it was perfectionism. I was really trying to hide that I didn't have it all together, that everything wasn't perfect in my life. And there has been several moments in my life, but the hardest was when I actually became a mum for the first time. And I'm going to share a bit of that story with you, if that's okay. When I became mum, it was an initiation that is not even close to what any mum would be thinking. And it was extremely hard. So I don't even know where to start. So when I became a mum, my husband was building a tiny house. like a really tiny house, like 7.2 meters by 2 meters on wheels. Those ones you've seen shows about, really tiny. And we were open to having a baby, but we we weren't trying, we were just open to it. And obviously the intention was very aligned because I fell pregnant pretty much straight away. And I found out I was pregnant 3 months before we moved into this tiny house. We had not planned to have a baby in this tiny house. So I had to really, really dig deep within myself and ask my soul, like, what was I meant to do? And I really felt this baby, was meant to come through us for a reason. And but I also knew that this project for my husband was extremely important, and that if he didn't do it now, it would happen in the future. So my soul said, we're going to lean into this, and it's going to be really hard, but we're going to lean in. And I trusted. And this is a big piece in vulnerability, not just not just relying on your trust in yourself. So I have trust in my soul, I have trust in my higher self, and I have a really strong connection to the universe and God and something greater than me. So when I'm feeling like full of doubt and scared, that's what I call on, and that's what I called on in that moment. And I was told to trust, but I was told it is going to be really hard. And it was. It was the hardest experience of my life so far. Giving birth was no problem. Being pregnant was no problem. But coming home to a tiny house, so to give you an idea, a picture in your head, it was all off grid. Our water source was a dam. We had generators, and I was having to, it was winter when I had my son, so I was having to learn how to use a generator, like even before I had him, like 28 weeks pregnant, like cranking the generator. When I look back now, I'm like, that's so dangerous. Can't believe I did that. But I was so committed to this perfectionism of like making it work. Like, what do I need to do to make it work? And this perfectionism is also attached to thinking I need to do it all on my own. So I didn't reach out. I didn't let people know where I was at and what I was going through. I was processing what I needed to, but I was crying on my own, and I was processing on my own. And that's the loneliness and the isolation that perfectionism puts you in, which is extremely dangerous. We're on a big property, and, not living close to family. We had one car. My husband was not in a good place. As I mentioned in my workshop, in his words, he was lost, and he wasn't really in a consistent job. It was there was a lot of uncertainty, and it was very unstable. And I came home with my son, and I honestly felt like I'd come home with 2 children. Thankfully, I had such an incredible birth because, and my body was able to heal, because my husband wasn't available to actually hold me through that process. And that is heartbreaking to admit, because I know he was capable of it. It was just, he was in a place within himself where he couldn't. And that was really hard. And, my ego really wanted to tell me things like I wasn't worthy and I wasn't doing enough. And that's why I wasn't receiving the love and support I needed. And I know that wasn't the truth, but when you're in a state of perfectionism, it can really make you think that. So I was just trying to be better and overcompensate, and, kind of all the cracks that were showing because of with my husband, I was just constantly, if you're a perfectionist, you can relate. I was just constantly trying to rescue him from his feelings and emotions, and like patch it up, and be everything, literally be everything to everyone. And what was the most heartbreaking thing about it is 10 days before I gave birth to my son, I actually birthed my first book as well. But I just had to let it go. I could not give it the love and attention it needed because I really felt like a single parent. And yeah, it was not the initiation I wanted to have. But it was the initiation I needed. And I can see that now, that I needed to get to this point where I realized I can't actually hold it all. It's not my responsibility to hold it all. I'm not responsible for my husband's journey or his feelings. And it's not my job to keep rescuing him from himself. And that's what I was doing. He wasn't even asking me to, but that's what I was doing because I was just scared. I was really scared that if I did leave the tiny house, that he would do something, and I felt responsible, and that I put that on me. And through all my healing and breaking up with perfectionism, I've been able to see that and really heal it. But it took some time of really going into that, and I can now see that really vulnerable, hard time actually built my resistance. But the resistance didn't, my resilience. At the time, I was resisting learning the resilience because I was trying to do it all on my own. But by the end of it, I had no choice. I had to receive help. And that is the key to resilience. So when you start to open up to vulnerability, you do actually build resilience at the same time. So because the more you open, the more you share, and you realize, okay, no one died. Because that's what your ego makes you think. It's like, if I share this really hard, vulnerable thing, someone's going to die, or I'm going to be judged, or I'm going to be rejected, or, something really bad is going to happen. And I'm now a lot more comfortable with these conversations because I've done it quite a few times now. And again, last year when me and my husband were going through that point where I thought, are we going to get divorced? That was another time I had to lean into vulnerability and really share that experience. And it was still hard, but when I did it, I was met with love. I was met with connection. I was met with people seeing me, hearing me, validating me. So it made me want to be more vulnerable. And it was such a gift. And it helped me build resilience. And what I learned about resilience is vulnerability is part of resilience. So if you're somebody who is a resilient person, what makes you different to a perfectionist is that you do get vulnerable, is that you do ask for help, is that you do share. You share from the heart. You share your hard experiences. You allow the light in to your darkness. You don't actually hide in the darkness. You allow your darkness to be seen. You bring it into the light. That builds resilience. And you surround yourself with other people that are doing the same, that are opening their heart. And that's what's so important and so vital about having these groups where you do open, and it's such an opportunity, like my soul nourishing sisterhood, to come into that group and share your vulnerability. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do next. And like me, just get a bit vulnerable and not be attached to what comes up. Just ask yourself, what in my life am I trying to hide from? What am I avoiding? What do I feel shame around? And where am I feeling guilty? Where are these feelings? Because normally if we're feeling any of that, we are closing off from it. We're keeping it in the dark. We're not bringing it into the light. But when we get back connected to our heart and soul, and we ask that question, what am I being asked to be really vulnerable about right now? And we share that, there's a freedom that's on the other side. And whenever I do this, whenever I get really vulnerable like this, the next thing that I allow myself to do is to give myself forgiveness, is to give myself compassion. And I really sit with myself and I say, I see you, Aston, I feel you, and I'm honoring your willingness to show your heart. And I allow the light and the love to come in from below, from the earth, and above, from the sky. And I allow the light to come in and to just really fill in all of the darkness and transmute it into light. Because I have now looked at that darkness, and it feels lighter because I've given myself permission to be vulnerable and to share it and to open and to shine light on it. And now that I've broken up with perfectionism, there's no part of me that needs to fix it. I actually just acknowledge it, and I thank myself and for being honest and vulnerable, and I forgive myself for feeling the shame, the blame, the guilt, the not enoughness, and I just bring in the light. And it really helps me to take a few breaths to really receive that light. And I really celebrate myself for being vulnerable, because I know that that's how I receive more love and connection. And that's bravery, and that's true courage. And the more that I do that, the more love and connection I receive, and the more authentic I am, and the more connected I feel to my authentic self and my soul. And the more resilience I build. It's incredible. It's honestly, there are so many gifts that come from vulnerability. I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to, overwhelm you with all of it now. But I really hope that that's invited you into it. And I just want to leave you with that question that I really wanted you to answer, if you're feeling called to lean into vulnerability too. And the question is, I just want you to ask, what is, whatever your thing is, so we all have a thing, whether it's overeating, scrolling on Facebook, the thing that you use to numb and turn off your vulnerability and express your feelings, and own your truth. What is it that you use to numb? Is it overeating? Is it spending? Is it gambling? Is it drinking? Is it smoking? Is it avoiding? Is it distraction? Is it perfectionism? For me, it was perfectionism and trying to be everything and do everything and just avoid looking at it. So ask yourself, what is that for you? And then ask, is that thing that you're doing getting in the way of your authenticity? Is it stopping you from being emotionally honest and setting boundaries about how you're feeling and whether you feel enough? Does it keep you in judgment? Are you judging yourself and others because of it? And does it stop you from feeling love and connection? And that's what I really learned. And are you using whatever that thing is, whatever your addiction or the thing to take the edge off your vulnerability, are you using it to hide or escape from the reality of your life? And that was the truth for me in the tiny house. That was definitely what I was doing. I was using perfectionism to hide from the reality of my experience. And because I didn't want to see it, I didn't want to feel the pain of it. It was excruciatingly painful. I felt like I had failed in every area. And I felt like I wasn't enough and that I wasn't doing enough. And to be honest, perfectionism just amplified all of that. It didn't help me. It didn't save me. It actually just took me deeper into the pain. And it took me a while to really see that and to start to process it and heal it. And yeah, it was a painful lesson, but like I always say, it's our painful lessons that have the most power and the most purpose. And I can really see that now. But I just want you to know that you're not alone. Whatever you're hiding, whatever you're feeling vulnerable about, I've been in enough of these groups now to see that when I share something vulnerable, even if their story on the surface doesn't look the same, they've felt the same things. And this is the thing with vulnerability. This is why we feel more connection when we are vulnerable, is we can all relate to the feelings underneath. We've all felt shame. We've all felt guilt. We've all felt not enough. We've all felt like a failure. And when we see that, it lets us know our humanness and that we're actually all in this together. We're not alone. It's an illusion that we're alone. And we're creating that illusion for ourselves. And if you're a perfectionist, like I was, the old me, that perfectionism was really creating this massive illusion that I was alone, and I was telling stories like I've got no support, no one cares about me, I have to do it all by myself. I'm alone in this relationship. I'm alone as a mum. I felt extremely isolated. And yes, I was in a physical isolated situation, but I also was creating a sense of isolation and a feeling of isolation within myself. And when I took the outside environment out of the equation, the feelings were still there. When I took my husband out of the equation, the feeling of isolation was still there. It was within me. When I took motherhood out of the equation, I was still feeling the isolation. So it's really important that we learn to do this from the inside out, not the outside in, because it always comes back to us. And this is how we get really vulnerable. This is how we learn vulnerability. We go inside, we go deep within ourselves, and then we get the courage to share it. So I really hope that that's inspired you, and if it has, please let me know. And if you're feeling, there's something you're hiding, I really invite you to come and join my sisterhood and get vulnerable with us. It's a loving space where you'll be held, seen, validated, and loved, and we're all in it together. So I really invite you into that. I'm sending you so much love, and just thank you so much for being here.